Japan's government will start releasing treated water from the wrecked Fukushima nuclear plant starting August 24th. Japan says it will remove most radioactive elements from the water except for tritium, a hydrogen isotope that must be diluted because of its difficulty to be filtered out. The Chinese government has voiced strong opposition on multiple occasions to Japan's decision to discharge treated nuclear wastewater into the ocean. And lead India correspondent Chris Gilbert joins us with more. Chris, how will Japan facilitate and execute the release of the radioactive water into the ocean?
Yeah, well, it's been 10 years in the making, this plan, and there's been a lot of speculation about when it was going to start. There was expectation that it may have been some months ago in the Northern Hemisphere spring, but that was delayed by the government to get the rubber stamp from the International Atomic Energy Agency, which came in July, saying that the project meets international safety standards. And then earlier in August, there were leaked reports through Japanese newspapers that it may begin towards the end of this month. And then after the trilateral summit that we just saw between Japan, South Korea and the US at the weekend, and as soon as the Prime Minister Fumio Kishida was back in Japan from that, he was straight up to Fukushima, meeting with TEPCO officials from the agency that's going to run this discharge facility, and also meeting with the fishers up there. And now, after meeting with cabinet and ministers this morning here in Tokyo at his official residence, has been announced that they want to release it as soon as this Thursday, some 12 and a half years almost after the tsunami that created this mess. And now it looks like the cleanup is going to continue, as you mentioned, in a phased process over the next 40 years until the discharge is completed, affecting generations to come.
All right, Chris, we've also seen China denounce this move. It has also called the radioactive water as nuclear sewage. Do we also have more domestic or international reactions coming in after this announcement that Japan will begin the release on August 24th?
There's sure to be international and domestic reaction. It is going to be a very long process, and many countries such as China have already made it very clear how they feel about it, and there is going to be international fallout. No doubt the government of Japan is expecting this and has prepared for it. It should be remembered that countries in the world such as Canada, France, the UK, South Korea and China are already discharging tritiated water from their nuclear facilities, and it also should be remembered who this discharge is going to affect most, which is going to be the communities along the Tohoku coastline, all the way from the very top of Japan almost down to Tokyo, who have already lost everything 12 years ago, their homes, their loved ones, and through the last 12 years have tried to rebuild and are now being asked by the government to carry the burden and the weight of this cleanup in their communities for another 40. And so there is surely going to be continued domestic reaction from the fishers and from the communities as they continue to live alongside this human-made cleanup.
All right, Chris, thank you for joining in with those inputs. And North Korea has issued a stern denouncement of the annual joint military exercises between the United States and South Korea in the aftermath of the international, in fact, trilateral agreements reached by the United States, South Korea and Japan during the recent summit at Camp David. Pyongyang issued a stern warning of a possible thermonuclear war in a landmark trilateral summit held at the U.S. presidential retreat of Camp David on August 18th. Leaders of the United States, South Korea and Japan agreed to deepen military and economic ties. Andrew Wood is joining us from Hong Kong for more on this. Andrew, spell out more details, or for that matter, an analysis on the timing of this denouncement. We know that this comes at a time when on one hand we have US, South Korea and Japan strengthening their association, and on the other hand we also just a few days back saw the North Korean leader inspect and supervise the missile launch.
Well, I think this is for domestic consumption as much as it is for international consumption. Remember, Kim Jong-un and his father and grandfather kept power in North Korea, partly by saying that that North Korea was always in a state of near war, and that people will make a lot of sacrifices if they feel that their very identity is under threat. So we saw the launch of those cruise missiles. That shows that Kim Jong-un is helping to protect his people. And we also saw the American, as you were saying, the American and South Korean exercises going on. This is another way that Kim Jong-un can say to his people, look, there really is a threat. So I think the timing is pretty predictable for North Korea. If in doubt, say something outrageous. There's no harm in keeping, it seems, if you're North Korea, in keeping people guessing. And North Korea has also said, as well as remember those cruise missiles a couple of days ago, it's going to launch a satellite between the 24th and the 31st of August, something that Japan has already condemned as being, not responsible.
All right, Andrew, also what do you make of the relationship between US, South Korea and Japan after the Camp David summit, because the three countries are aspiring for for a stronger relationship militarily. So how do you evaluate this association as well?
I think it's quite a feather in the cap for President Biden. Both South Korea and Japan are long-standing allies of the United States, and there are tens of thousands of American troops both in Japan and in South Korea to deter an attack by North Korea, and also more broadly with Japan as well, to probably to deter China too. But there's South Korea and Japan, I don't think there's any chance of them going to war with each other anytime soon. But there is a lot of bad blood between the two countries, stretching back many centuries, and more particularly in the last 80 or 90 years, when many South Korean, or Korean in general, women were used as sex slaves for the Japanese army. And there's a feeling that in South Korea that Japan has never said sorry properly. That said, South Korea and Japan do seem to have a particularly good spell of relations at the moment. And I always find it surprising that these two American allies don't talk to each other more about defense. But that's one of the things that seems to be improving over the past few months, especially after this Camp David summit, that both South Korea and Japan say they're going to share more information, especially about missiles, especially about North Korea, which will help to secure a tighter alliance between them and also with America.
All right, Andrew, thank you for joining in with those inputs.